Ladies and gentlemen, grab your gloves and get your compost ready. Stepping into the ring is the perennial powerhouse, the sultan of soil, the beast of the beds, where permaculture reigns, food grows wild, community roots run deep, and yes, the garden punts hit hard. Freedom starts in the soil. This is the Guerrilla Gardening Show.
Welcome back to the Guerrilla Gardening Show. I hope everyone is enjoying our brand new intro from my man Stoner Bro Flex, and shout outs to Destruct on the beat. Back again with my man Sam from Central Florida Abundance. What's happening, Sam?
What's up, Mike? I'm enjoying that song from Flicks. That is some good work. I'm happy to get this show going. And I got a little bit that I want to talk about today. I've got a plant in my backyard that has really been instrumental to helping me get started. And I want to show it off, talk about it, and let people know how it can be used in their yards. I don't think you have this one, but maybe you'll get some.
Yeah, you know me. If there's a public park that has some, then I'll have some. But
Well, you probably won't find it out
no,
in the
probably
public
not.
landscaping. And so what we're going to talk about is Napier grass. And I've got a short clip of some of the Napier that's been in my yard. Now, Napier's main function, as you're about to see, is to produce biomass. Now, most of the plants in my property are biomass producers. I'm a strong believer that you need, way more biomass than production. So along the edges, if we play this video, you can kind of get an idea how I've made the borders of my beds here, and all the beds are in cover crops, so it looks kind of crazy. But these are the Napier grasses along the edges, and you can see how they've been cut and used as mulch.
I see
The
like a bunch of moringas in there too.
ton of moringas. That's another good chop and drop species that I like to use. I do moringas and pigeon peas in between the Napier. Um, and really what that Napier does, it provides a protected place for some of those smaller annual plants that grow inside the Napier blocks. But then it also produces all the mulch and cycles nutrients through the systems. Those grasses we just saw, the green ones, are vetiver, very similar to Napier, in their function. They're a bunching grass that is really good to be cut and then, mulch back into the ground. The thing about the Napier specifically, and why I want to highlight that, is because when I started working on this property, which was a little less than 2 years ago, I purchased two Napier plants. And those were two plants in 1 gallon containers. I planted them in the banana circle, and all of the Napier on this property has come from those two plants.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's a really easy plant to propagate. Um, it's a similar growth style to sugarcane, where it forms a stalk as the grasses get taller. And so you can use those stalks to root new plants. And so without even having to dig up the clumps, I'm able to divide. Um, After I think like 6 months of those original clumps, we did dig them up and then divided them into about 20 different plants. Um, and then since then, I've just been using the hardwood cuttings to propagate more. Um, I cut these grasses. These that we're looking at right here were cut less than a week ago. And when I say cut, I mean cut down to the ground. Um,
Wow.
yeah, you can almost see where it's more dense down at the bottom.
Yeah.
That's how low I cut them. And the amount of regrowth and the speed of it is insane. Most of the time you can see about an inch or two of new growth a couple hours after you cut them.
Wow.
Yeah. They talk about watching grass grow being boring, but if it was this grass, it'd be a little more interesting. Um, Now, I've talked up this grass a lot. Now I have to get into the butts because, you know, it's a great resource and it seems just, magical. It really doesn't die. You can reproduce it like crazy. You can produce tons of biomass. But what can happen if you start to ignore this plant, it will make sure that it takes every opportunity that it has. And, those same abilities, not being able to die, reproducing really heavily is going to cause it to spread and it can seriously take over an area if it's not controlled. I cut these grasses every 2 or 3 weeks, and usually I don't let them get above like 4 feet tall. Later on in the video, there's some, I think, some that maybe have gone a month or two without being cut, because they're kind of in the back of some cover crops, and so they're much, much bigger, but still not as big as they can be. These things will get, 10 feet tall with hard woody canes, and then those canes will just fall over. Right here on the side next to the grass, these were all put in about a month ago, really just from cuttings. So no
Wow.
leaves, no roots, just cuttings stuck in, and then they were watered. And this is actually a bed that we saw in a previous video when we were talking about my banana pit.
Hmm.
There was like a patch of bare soil beside the banana pit, and this is what the bare soil's turned into.
Wow.
Um, we're mostly growing roselle and sweet potatoes in there, but
Okay.
we've got zinnias, cowpeas, and sun hemp as like a cover crop, um, mostly to keep the soil covered. And it needs a little bit of a chop and drop, but it really just started to flush out. So we're just kind of enjoying the green at the moment.
Now, Sam, the Napier grass, does it grow similar to lemongrass as far as the root ball structure? Like, lemongrass one will turn into, I think I propagated 32 from one lemongrass before. So is it kind of just like little bulbs you can pull apart, stick in the ground, or is it a different type of grass?
No, it's a lot like that.
Okay.
Most of your bunching grass species are going to be just like that, where you can divide that root ball into multiple different sections. Um, and so I really like to rank my grasses on, if I'm using them for chop and drop. I've got a little list of how I've ranked them because I have lemongrass in the yard, I have Mombasa grass, I have the vetiver, I've used Fakahatchee, and then obviously the Napier. Um, and so the Napier is really what I've settled on for my space in the early succession, when I need a lot of biomass really quickly. And the main reasons I chose Napier was because its growth habit is very upright. It'll get 10 feet tall, but it normally won't get more than 4 or 5 feet wide. Whereas the Mombasa grass, which is another one that's really commonly used, it gets extremely wide. It can take up an 8 foot circle. And so in my small space, it doesn't really make sense. Um, I would say the vetiver grass is my favorite long term, and I hope to eventually switch out all the Napier with vetiver. The vetiver is tied with Napier on my list. I'd say, different times they could be better or worse, but the vetiver has really no invasive potential. The seeds don't germinate real easily. It doesn't form stalks, so it doesn't reproduce that way. Um, the main way to reproduce vetiver is to divide that clump. So the ones I have planted, I will dig up and then divide into smaller pieces. Whereas the Napier, I don't have to dig it up. And so it helps me get started early on. But there's really one more thing that kind of determines where these grasses are on my list is how easy they are to work with. Um, a lot of the bunching grass species have like fiberglass, maybe silicone based hairs all along the stems. And
Mm.
that's to deter, animals from eating them. But they're a huge irritant. Napier grass has them, but they don't really become irritating until the grass is dried out. So, like the grass that's off to the left that I've laid down and all dry, if you stuck your hand in that, it's, not going to be the most pleasant experience. You're going to come up with, quite a few things sticking in your hand. They're not so bad that it's going to, require a visit to a doctor or to get your hand stitched up, but it's not really what you want in the garden
Right.
all the time. The vetiver grass has none of that. There's no hairs. You can go and cut it barehanded. You can, dry it out, bale it up, mess with it however you want, and you don't get that. Um, you mentioned the lemongrass earlier, and I did use that early on because it's really the easiest thing to get. Everywhere is selling lemongrass, but the hairs on lemongrass are extremely aggressive. If
Mm.
you reach your hand down into that plant and then try to pull your hand back up, it will cut you. Um, and so that was a slight drawback in the beginning. And then what I ran into is if the lemongrass ever goes to seed, though it makes so many seeds and they germinate so easily, you end up with lemongrass popping up and, you know, everywhere. And in some situations, in food forests and perennial gardens, that can be fine because that's just free biomass. The plant reproduced on its own. But in my system where it's real small and real structured, the grasses need to stay on the edge, and I don't want them popping up anywhere they're not supposed to be. So the Napier has really just allowed me to create so much mulch and biomass without really much input on my part. It's the bunching grasses are really deeply rooted, so they don't need too much extra water. Right back here behind this papaya, you can see some of the Napier grass that hasn't been cut in a while. I'm going to
Hmm.
go into it. Um, and you can kind of imagine if it was just left to do its own thing, it would spread and just take over everything. But these are still not at a height that they're hard to cut down. Really, it's never hard to cut it down. It's not even really, difficult to kill it if you really want to. I said it's hard to kill, but if you dig it up out of the ground, it's gone. You know, uh,
Right.
you want to make sure to get most of the roots, but it's not a thing that spreads through your yard. It's not like passion flower or something. So it can be removed, and my plan is that once I leave this property, I'll probably be digging up most of the Napier grass and uh, taking it to the next property. Um, but in the short term, it's a powerhouse. It feeds the soil, it feeds the microbes, and it provides a lot of structure for my young annuals.
Nice. I see a 5 or 6 foot tall moringa. I know you said you had a bunch of them scattered around with the pigeon pea as well. You treat those like annuals, correct?
Um, the moringas, so the moringas that are in the grass rows are gonna be perennials.
Okay.
And I'm really gonna use them for shade. I grow a lot of tomatoes and peppers and things that just don't like full sun in the middle of the day. So the moringas, the one closest to us and the one in the back, they're at about 10 feet right now. And so the one in the back, I already topped it, and I'm going to top this one up here soon to make them kind of branch out laterally so then I can get more coverage throughout the day, on my annuals. The pigeon peas that are on the right here, um, this one needs to be pruned. But what I do is I just keep I continuously lift the skirt. I chop all the bottom branches off of it and just leave 2 or 3 branches at the top. And again, that's just to create canopy. Um, but yeah, it's crazy how much work you got to do to make shade, for these things that they say want full sun.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I was just curious because I mean, I have a moringa tree that I don't think the 30-year-old reinforced concrete pool that's in the ground is going to have to worry too much about the moringa, but that thing is gnarly. You could, I mean, just like the roots in the ground. And then, I mean, I've topped this thing 3 or 4 times, and the main stalk is like, you know,
Oh yeah.
it's girthy,
Oh,
I guess.
they get huge. And I
Yeah.
mean, you probably won't ever have to worry about it killing your pool. And moringas, I mean, they can get big, but as far as trees go, they're a short-term tree. They don't really, live healthily for more than 10 years or so.
Okay.
And, I grow them as early succession trees. So you can kind of think about it like, you've got an area of wilderness that is currently prairie or, some type of open sun field, and it's trying to make its way back to forest, and it's not going to immediately grow, the oaks and the hickories, these long-term trees. The first tall plants that are going to grow are going to be your kind of short-lived weedy species of trees. And moringa really falls right into that. It loves to grow in poor soils. It'll grow quickly, provide a canopy, provide some cover, so that when those higher order trees do start to germinate and sprout in the area, they're protected by the moringa. But then the moringas don't live very long. So once the moringa has, come to terms, it provides new open sunlight for these higher order trees to then take advantage of. And so, I mean, really in early food forests, in yards that you're just starting to turn the soil from lawn into something healthier, more productive, getting those weedy, pioneer, fast growing trees is really critical. A forest doesn't just pop up in a field overnight. It's got stages, and when we try to recreate those stages, that can greatly improve the health of our future plants. The grasses do the same thing, in really before those low order trees would start to grow, you would get a lot of perennial grasses in an area. And usually those perennial grasses are paired with grazing animals, in an area like this Napier grass is actually, I think it's native to Africa. I probably shouldn't even guess, but it is traditionally grazed by elephants. So
Okay.
either Africa or like Southeast Asia. Um, and so, this plant is evolved to take, you know, munching from a large herbivore. And so since we don't have, I mean, I don't, not even running cows out here. So I have to act as that herbivore, and I come through just like, the elephants would migrate through an area. They come through, see the good grass, eat it. Once the grass was gone, they'd leave it alone for a while. And that's just what I'm doing here. And then, in another 2 weeks, when this grass is, what I like to do, you can kind of see that right now the tips of the grasses are all flat. Um, and that's, from it being cut, that's kind of what would happen if it had been grazed by an animal. But eventually those tips will round back off. And then that's when I like to come in and cut again. Um, so, we're just trying to mimic natural cycles out here. And sometimes we got to work with, you know, I see the Napier grass as kind of like working on a needle's edge.
Hmm.
It's great and great. But then if you forget about it or fall off, it's going to turn into disaster. So, it keeps me on my toes. It makes sure that I'm always paying attention.
How do they do well in containers or large containers?
Yeah. Um, you know, they wouldn't do as well just because the roots of the Napier grass, I mean, they can go like 6 feet down into the ground.
Okay. So they
So
want
if
to
you,
expand.
yeah, if you put it in a container, it's going to root itself into the ground, which isn't really a problem.
So Sam, not that, Wikipedia would ever lie to us, but according to Wikipedia and the Googles, it says Napier grass, also known as elephant grass or Uganda grass, is a tall
Mm.
perennial tropical grass native to Africa, commonly used as fodder for livestock. It's valued for high biomass production, low water and nutrient requirements, and its role in improving soil fertility and preventing erosion.
I think that sounds about right. I'm glad to know that it is native to Africa. I guess
You can
near
you can continue to
Uganda.
say that. We've confirmed it
Yeah.
with Wikipedia. So
It's crazy to me how many of my plants come from like, I mean, the African continent, mostly like West Africa, like the roselle, the pigeon peas, the cassava. It's so the climate there is so similar that a lot of the plants can just transfer back and forth. Sometimes, you got to be careful with that because we don't
yeah,
have the same checks and balances. But as long as you're a good manager, you can use plants safely.
cool.
But yeah, you think you're
Um,
gonna get some for your yard?
oh, I definitely want some. I have an area at some point we'll do a video and we could talk about what could possibly go in this area in front of my house. You've got your street, patch of grass, sidewalk, lawn.
Hmm.
And so the patch of grass between the sidewalk and the street, I mean, mine's just it's a dirt patch right now. And we talked about um, sunshine mimosa or perennial peanut, probably the peanut because it only gets sun early in the morning.
Okay.
But my neighbors have a couple fruit trees from years ago. They're older loquat trees, but um, I've contemplated on what we could put in that patch, and maybe, I mean, it's going to become a spot for neighborhood dogs and cats to do their business in as well. So I don't know that I really want, you know, food producing plants there, but maybe if that's a biomass center.
Yeah, you could make a hedge, a little privacy screen with Napier. I mean, it with as tall and full as it gets, you definitely wouldn't have anything walking in that spot anymore. I mean, the dogs would probably still pee on it, but
Yeah, yeah.
it would like I said, they can fill out like a 3 or 4 foot area, circle. And so just with a couple of them, and it'd be a really nice hedge to see because it would be dynamic. Sometimes nobody would be able to see your house from the road, and then the next day they'd be able to see your whole yard. So, I mean, that could work out. And I mean, really the poor soil areas, things that, places where other things are having trouble growing, that's a great place to mix in these biomass plants because they're really adapted for those poor conditions. Um, Napier, it does prefer full sun, but I've definitely seen it growing in some filtered sunlight. So, you might have slower growth, but it was probably still do all right. And some slower growth might even be welcomed, if you're not trying to get out there every week.
Yeah. Well, maybe in the future we do a video on grasses in general, and we can kind of. I know you went through a lot of that today, breaking down some of the grasses, but um,
We can definitely
maybe
do a more in-depth video kind of showing off the different types. And some of their different stages. Um, because I mean, really, you know, whatever, if you have a bunching grass species, use it for mulch. If you want to keep the seeds out, but most of them aren't going to have seeds all the time. So, use what you got. Um, and really what I try to do is I just look for the best option for me. Every situation is going to have their own best. And really, at the end of the day, the best thing you can do is have diversity. I don't just grow Napier grass. I did take out the Mombasa grass because it was too big, but all those other species are still on my property. They just, aren't as at the forefront of my attention like the Napier is, but I still cut the lemongrass down and make a nice, citronella mulch. That's
Okay.
always a great experience. You just got to make sure you got your long sleeves on and gloves. Um, but I would assume that, using some lemongrass mulch may even have some pest repellent or properties. You know, at the very least, it makes everything smell good.
Awesome.
So you use what you got, use different things, and and tell us what you're using, really. And that's what I'd like to hear. Does anybody have any grasses, any bunching grass species that I didn't mention today? Yeah, I'd love to see a comment on some other varieties.
Yeah. Um, Pretty soon I'll be out there with some smoking grass. So,
That's a different video. Don't use that for chop and drop.
no,
I mean, I
no.
guess you could. Your plants would be real happy.
Yeah, yeah. All right. Sam, awesome episode again today, my friend. Tell everybody where they can find more of you and your services at Central Florida Abundance.
Absolutely. You can, if you're interested in a regenerative garden consultation or some garden maintenance, you can check out Central Florida Abundance on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. My link tree will be on there to shoot me an email. You can also check out the Igo Family Farm if you're in Polk County and looking to buy some produce. It's been great talking with you today, Mike. How are we going to find you after this?
I'm at Mike's in the Garden pretty much everywhere. You can follow me on Instagram. I post a lot of good stuff on there, and also YouTube is where most of it's at. Where you're probably watching this either on Mike's in the Garden or at Central Florida Abundance. And I want to share real quick. I just dropped this new shirt, and this is definitely something that I think a lot of our viewers will want to see. This is the new shirt drop, many different colors and options. So these are the top invasive species of Florida. We have Burmese pythons, we have New Yorkers, and we have land developers. So
That's perfect.
if that tickles your fancy, you can head to my Etsy shop at the link below and check out some more great shirts at this link. So go check them out.
Go over to Mike's page and go get them shirts. I'm gonna grab me one. New Yorkers. Uh,
I'm like, hopefully it pisses enough
where
people off where
where are you from, Mike?
I'm a Boston guy.